A very good evening and welcome to the news at 6, where we get you the day's top developing stories. I'm Tracy Shilshi and let's head straight to the headlines. Opposition turns up the heat on Narendra Modi government over the Lalit Modi visa issue, demands the resignation of Sushma Swaraj, but BJP rallies behind the External Affairs Minister. Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar stirs another controversy, says the Indian Army has lost its importance because it fought no wars in recent years. Opposition slams the remarks. Inflation stays in negative zone for the 7th month in May, registers a decline of 2.36% on the back of falling prices of food and fuel. Wanted on genocide and war crime charges, the Sudanese president leaves South Africa defying an arrest order. South Africa now faces the heat from Western nations. All right, let's start with some business news now. And inflation remained in negative territory for the 7th month in May, registering a decline of 2.36%. The wholesale price index-based inflation was minus 2.65% in April. It has been in the negative zone since November 2014. Inflation in last May was 6.18%. Prices were subdued mainly on account of food items, fuel and manufactured goods. The lower inflation comes amid a forecast of deficient monsoon this year, though in contrast to IMD's forecast of 12% deficient rainfall, the onset of monsoon has been reasonably strong so far. The CPI inflation inched up marginally in May to over 5% from 4.87% in the previous month. All right, to understand the indications and what it eventually means to the consumer, to the Aam Aadmi, let's speak to Himanshu Vats, who's the senior editor of the Economic Times, joining us in studio this evening. Himanshu, give us a sense. Is this good news, especially for consumers?
Yes, it is good news. When the wholesale price index contracts, it's very good news for the consumer because, for many years consumers have been used to pretty high inflation. But there are certain trends which are not very encouraging. So it's a mixed picture. And I think the data for the next few months is going to be crucial. The reason I say there are certain trends, one is, food prices, they're not rising too much. It's around 3% or something. But in a overall sense, where other prices are declining, these prices have risen up, and monsoon is something we've got to really watch out for. Among food prices, if you look at pulses, they've gone up some, I think, 20% or something. So those are disturbing trends. The other is, if you look at the fuel prices, petrol, diesel and all, they're still down from a year ago, around 10, 11% or some such number. But in the last few months, they have been rising. So, when you look at inflation, you actually look at year on year. So in a few months, you will come to a point where the previous year oil had fallen a lot. So in comparison, you're not going to have this 10%, 11% fall year on year. So those are things to watch out for in the future. But on the whole, for the consumer, very good.
Okay, that's good to know. And this trend in negative, like you're saying, there are a few factors which are, one needs to watch out for. One of them being the monsoons. Is that going to have a big bearing on how the figures eventually pan out to be?
Yeah, monsoon is going to be crucial overall for the economy because, rural demand is important. And in a more human and political sense, 60 to 70% of Indians are directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. So monsoon is important, and if monsoon is not good, there could be inflationary pressures. Although the government is taking lots of steps, they've announced they're going to import pulses, they are ready with contingency plans. And the good news, as your report also said, so far the start of the monsoon has been pretty good. It is rainfall in the season so far is actually 11% more than normal because last 4 days or so rainfall has been good. So monsoon is something to watch out for. Apart from the actual impact, it also has a lot of impact on the sentiment in the financial markets.
Yes.
the last week, stock market fell on many days on concerns of monsoon.
When the IMD came out with the forecast, I mean, we saw how the markets eventually responded to that. Yeah.
So it makes a lot of difference to the sentiment.
All right.
And today the market has gone up, and one of the reasons is that, reports that so far the monsoon has been not bad at all.
All right, that's good to know. But then inflation being in the negative territory, it's been 7 months now. Is this something that's unusual? Have we seen something like this in the past few years?
Not in the past few years, but around 10, 12 years ago, we have seen this inflation at negative, zero, low single digit. So, it depends on a whole lot of factors. One of the factors is the down cycle in commodities globally. So, plenty of metals, minerals, food commodities, edible oils, they are at pretty low prices. And in many cases, like edible oils, for example, India is a big importer. And once international prices are down, it gives you a lot of cushion in the inflationary sense. So these factors have come up in the past. Then before the current fall in prices, the fall in inflation rate, globally there was a bull run of commodities at an unprecedented scale. For around a decade or so, commodities were just rising, whether it was farm commodities, ores, minerals, oil, everything was rising. So that was one of the reasons why prices in India were also rising pretty rapidly. We had a sustained bout of high inflation. But in the past, we have seen such downturns also in prices.
All right. We'll leave it there for now, Himanshu. Thanks so much for joining us with those details there. As always, putting into perspective what it eventually means for people like us, the consumers, in fact, because eventually that's where, the benefits trickle down to. Thanks so much for joining us. Meanwhile, let's head on to more news. Quite a big story. This opposition parties led by the Congress strengthened their demand for the resignation of External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj in connection with the Lalit Modi visa issue. They're also seeking an explanation from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, though the BJP is defending Sushma Swaraj. Here are all the details.
Opposition parties turned up the heat on the Narendra Modi government on Monday. The Congress demanded the resignation of External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj for facilitating travel for former IPL chief Lalit Modi outside UK. Party leaders said her action cannot be defended on the grounds of humanitarian consideration.
कानून अलग होता है, ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ग्राउंड्स अलग होते हैं। ह्यूमैनिटेरियन ग्राउंड्स कानून को ओवरलुक नहीं करते। मेरे को सबसे ताज्जुब ये हुआ कि आरएसएस के लोग भी सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं।
प्रधानमंत्री जी हमें बताएं कि ललित मोदी जी की शिकायत की सिफारिश विदेश मंत्री जी ने जब की तो उनसे पूछ के की बिना बताए की।
According to British media, a senior Labour minister of Indian origin used the Swaraj's name to put pressure on the head of UK immigration to help Lalit Modi. Modi has been in UK since 2010. The IPL founder's passport was revoked following allegations of misappropriation of funds in the tournament.
एक प्रकार से अगर ये गलती हुई है तो कहीं न कहीं जिसको मदद किया गया उसने धोखा दिया है और मुझे लगता है कि इसमें कोई ऐसा दम नहीं है जिस पर इतनी बड़ी बात कांग्रेसी उठा रहे हैं।
While the left saw it as an abuse of position, CPM General Secretary Sitaram Yechuri wanted the Prime Minister to tell Parliament how he proposed to address the matter.
The Prime Minister who has been talking and the BJP which has been talking very loudly about a new style of governance, minimum government and maximum governance, accountability, and I mean that there's been no corruption in the last 1 year. All these have been issues of propaganda. But when it actually comes to the brass tacks, you have this instance where the Prime Minister is absolutely quiet and silent.
Meanwhile, even as the BJP continued to support Swaraj, some opposition parties claimed the episode is a fallout of an internal war within the BJP.
ये मैं बार-बार कह रहा हूं कि दरअसल बीजेपी के अंदर गैंगवार शुरू हो गया है और गैंगवार में अगर आप देखिए तो सुषमा स्वराज पर निशाना साधा गया क्योंकि सुषमा स्वराज बीजेपी की बहुत ताकतवर नेता हैं और प्रधानमंत्री पद के लिए भविष्य में एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती भी बनकर उभर सकती हैं।
Former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram has also demanded the release of letters written to the British government on the Lalit Modi case. As Finance Minister, Chidambaram had asked the British government why it was not taking action against Modi. He had reportedly told Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, in 2013 that Britain should deport him as Modi's passport was impounded in India and his UK visa had run out. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, Sushma Swaraj, not the only BJP minister under attack from the opposition. Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar too has raised yet another controversy, saying that the Indian Army has lost its importance because it has fought no wars in recent years. The opposition was quick to pounce on it, calling his words an insult and demeaning to the armed forces. Here's more.
अभी कम हो गया। इसका एक कारण है कि हम 40-50 वर्ष युद्ध देखे।
The Honourable Defence Minister speaks of the armed forces. Invitation again, knowingly or unknowingly, to another flurry of controversy.
पहले के जमाने में जब सेना के कमांडिंग ऑफिसर का कुछ भी खत IAS ऑफिसर जो कलेक्टर है या राज्य का कोई अधिकारी उसको मिले तो it is to receive an attention of highest order. अभी कम हो गया, खत्म नहीं हुआ।
Already under fire over the delay in implementing the one rank, one pension scheme, the Defence Minister invited further criticism. Opposition parties were quick to term the statement anti-national. Others slammed it as disrespect to the heroes guarding our borders day and night.
इस सरकार में मंत्रियों का जुबान पर अंकुश नहीं रह गया है। वो कुछ न कुछ ऐसे कदम दे देते हैं, ऐसे बयान भी उनके आ जाते हैं जो शर्मिंदा करते हैं देश को।
ये इनह्यूमन एंटी नेशनल वक्तव्य है। युद्ध होते हैं, सैनिक मरते हैं, जनधन की हानि होती है।
सेना हम रखते हैं अपनी रक्षा के लिए। सेना वेल इक्विप्ड हो ये मैं मानता हूं, सेना तैनात हो ये मैं मानता हूं। इस वक्त आज का माहौल में परंतु लड़ते रहना चाहिए बार बार, इसका क्या मतलब है?
Saying we haven't fought and that's why we are rusty, I think it's a bad aspersion on the Indian Army, Indian Navy and in the Air Force, because they are all ready to go in once the country says go ahead. We can't go for a war on our own.
But once again, Parrikar, for all his reputation of being a loose cannon, has got a word in defence from his own partymen. And once again, the plea is his remark was misinterpreted.
I think when the minister, when the defence minister makes that statement, he does this with a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge that he has about the functioning, about the image of the armed forces while he's serving as a defence minister. I think it's a concern that will be shared with millions of other people.
It's been a series of off-the-cuff controversy-raising remarks from Manohar Parrikar in the recent past. His terrorist against terrorist comment had raised hackles, as have his quips on the one rank, one pension issue, among several others. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, a group of former servicemen started their relay hunger strike in the national capital today, demanding immediate implementation of the one rank, one pension policy. The former soldiers have threatened to take their agitation to different parts of the country if the government does not announce a date to introduce the ORAP scheme. Hundreds of retired army personnel held protests at Jantar Mantar yesterday on the issue. They also sought President Pranab Mukherjee's intervention on their behalf. Although Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar has assured them the government will deliver on its promise, he has asked them to be more patient and term the protests as uncalled for.
हमने ये मुहिम जो शुरू करी है तो सिर्फ एक दिन के लिए नहीं थी। ये मुहिम अभी बहुत देर तक के लिए प्लान किया हुआ है। कल तो शुरुआत था रैली के साथ और आज से पहले से अनाउंस किया हुआ था कि हम रिले हंगर स्ट्राइक पे ऑलमोस्ट 55 सिटीज़ के साथ बीच में करेंगे और भी बढ़ सकती हैं। आहिस्ता आहिस्ता 100 सिटी भी हो सकती है, 200 भी हो सकती है।
With that, we'll take a quick break here, but still ahead, the Supreme Court cancels the All India PreMedical Test 2015 and orders a re-examination. Welcome back. Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi reached Chhattisgarh today, where he took up issues confronting tribal residents there. Meeting people in Korba district today, he launched a direct attack against Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his model of development. Here's more.
Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi started a two-day visit to Chhattisgarh on Monday, pitching for forest rights for tribals. He slammed the BJP governments at the state and the centre while questioning their development model.
आदिवासी लोग जंगल से जुड़े हुए लोग होते हैं, उनकी जिंदगी जंगल से जुड़ी हुई होती है। आप जंगल से फल लेते हो, तेंदू पत्ता लेते हो, अलग अलग चीजें लेते हो, और अगर माइन आई और जंगल चला गया तो एक प्रकार से आपका हाथ कट गया। सही बात है, गलत बात? तो मोदी जी बड़े बड़े भाषण देते, कहते विकास, मगर मेरा यह सवाल है कि विकास होगा और होना चाहिए, मगर इस विकास में आदिवासियों के बच्चों का क्या भाग होगा, यह सवाल है।
Rahul also hit out at the NDA's land ordinance that omits the consent clause for farmers and carrying out a social audit before acquiring land.
अगर 5 साल में प्रयोग नहीं हुआ तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, एक बार जमीन ले ली तो ले ली, और सोशल ऑडिट तो छोड़ो। सोशल ऑडिट का क्या मतलब? अगर आदिवासियों से जमीन ली जा रही है तो ये इनकी जमीन है, उनसे पूछ के जमीन ली जाए, उनसे पूछ के ली जाए। और दूसरी बात, अगर विकास हो रहा है तो उसमें आदिवासी का भी विकास हो, उसमें आदिवासी भी शामिल हो।
Promising to uphold the rights of Jal, Jangal and Zameen for state residents, Rahul said his party will stand with the tribals just as it is doing with farmers. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The Supreme Court today scrapped the All India PreMedical Test 2015 and ordered a reconduct of the examination within 4 weeks. A 2-judge vacation bench of the top court directed the institutions involved in conduct of the examination to assist CBSE in this regard within the stipulated period decided by it. Following the court order, more than 6.3 lakh students will have to take a fresh test. A re-examination was ordered following complaints of large-scale cheating in the test, with students getting answers in the examination hall at many places. With that, let's take you through some more news from across the country in Nationwide. Unidentified gunmen dressed in army clothes shot dead a former militant in Sopore today. The victim was identified as Ejaz Ahmed Reshi. He was previously associated with the Harkat-ul-Mujahideen. The murder was the 4th such attack in the North Kashmir town in the last 7 days and the 2nd since yesterday. No militant outfit has claimed responsibility for the killings so far. A journalist, Haider Khan, in Uttar Pradesh's Pilibhit district was brutally assaulted. He was tied to a motorcycle and dragged for about 100 meters on Sunday, allegedly for his report on dubious land deals. The police registered a case against 4 people and started investigation in the case. The attack comes just days after another journalist, Jagendra Singh, was allegedly set on fire during a police raid at his house in Shahjahanpur district earlier this month. 2 people, including a minor girl, died while 5 others suffered injuries after an LPG cylinder exploded in the Kuli Bazar area of Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh. 3 houses collapsed from the explosion. The police launched a rescue operation with the help of locals. A forensic team is ascertaining the cause of the explosion. International news now. The Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir was on Monday allowed to return home unimpeded after attending a summit in Johannesburg, even as a court case was going on in Pretoria over attempts to have him arrested on charges of genocide and war crimes. Here's more.
At their 25th summit in Johannesburg, African nation leaders meeting to chart out a development agenda only managed to invite the fury of the West. On Monday, South Africa allowed Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to leave the country after the meet, on the very day the Pretoria High Court was expected to decide if he should be handed to the International Criminal Court. Bashir is charged with war crimes and genocide. The court had on Sunday barred him from leaving the country.
President Bashir is participating in this summit on an invitation from the AU and a welcoming reception from the government of South Africa. And as you know that the summit, the African Union summit, has always been against the ICC and its indictment to African presidents, including President Bashir.
The US joined the United Nations in calling for implementing the ICC's warrant for Bashir's arrest. Bashir is accused of committing war crimes during the Darfur conflict. The UN says 4 lakh people in Sudan died and over 2 million fled their homes since fighting began in 2003.
We are here as a guest and hosted by the government of South Africa. I believe the government of South Africa can deal with its court and whoever is trying to stop President Bashir from leaving the country.
As a member of the ICC, South Africa is obliged to arrest anyone charged by the court. However, South Africa says it has granted diplomatic immunity to all summit leaders as standard international practice. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, a Chinese couple resurrected the giant Buddhas of Bamiyan with a 3D projection technology, being a unique tribute to the historic relics that were destroyed by the Taliban nearly a decade and a half ago. They unveiled the holographic statues on Sunday to music and dancing on Sunday night.
Destroyed 14 years ago by the Taliban, the 6th century Bamiyan Buddhist statues were briefly brought to life earlier this month. On June 6th and 7th, Chinese couple Zhang Xinyu and his wife Liang Hong used projections to bring back the Buddha's images for 8 hours. Excited locals sang and danced for the historic moment.
A very historical moment for us, and I think it's the moment that somehow reminds us of revival of our history, something that was destroyed during the Taliban time.
The couple used metal halogen lamps and added a quartz glass mask to the light source to avoid any possible damage to the relics. They also donated the lighting equipment to the local authorities, who will reproduce the images in March every year.
怕有这么微弱的一丝光能够照进巴米扬，能够照亮大佛。我觉得至少能够告诉我们，这个世界上还有这么一块美丽的地方。 而且还有这么悠久的历史和文化的存在，我们也希望能够通过这种光影技术，能够向历史和文化去致敬。
Built in 507 AD and 554 AD, the Buddhas represented the classic and blended style of Gandhara art in the Bamiyan Valley in the Hazarajat region in central Afghanistan. In March 2001, the Taliban destroyed them with dynamite on orders from their leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
A top Islamist militant who ordered a deadly attack on an Algerian gas plant 2 years ago was killed in a US airstrike in Libya. Libya says Mukhtar Belmokhtar was killed in the eastern city of Ajdabiya. The US said Belmokhtar was targeted in the strike but did not confirm his death. Belmokhtar's death has been reported many times in the past. He was a former senior figure in the Al-Qaeda but left to form his own militia. He gained notoriety with the attack on the Amina gas plant in Algeria in 2013, when about 800 people were taken hostage and 40 killed, most of them foreigners. With that, let's take you through some more international news in Global Buzz. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon met Yemeni officials representing exiled President Mansour Hadi, even as planned peace talks between the country's warring sides seemed headed for yet another delay. The session took place without the Iran-backed Houthi rebels or yet any other Yemeni political parties. The talks are expected to last 2 or 3 days. UN's Special Envoy to Syria, Stefan de Mistura, arrived in Damascus to meet Syrian officials for a 2-day visit. Mistura is trying to find common ground among the parties with an interest in ending Syria's civil war. The aim of the visit is to know Syrian officials' views concerning the Geneva consultations. Scores of migrants woke up after spending a night on the rocks along the Mediterranean Sea at a border crossing between Italy and France. They were prevented from entering France from the northern Italian coast town of Ventimiglia. Italy warned unspecified retaliation against the European Union if governments did not make good on pledges to take in more asylum seekers. A teenage North Korean soldier walked across the world's most heavily militarized border on Monday in a bid to defect to South Korea. According to South Korean Defense Ministry, there were more than 1,000 defections from North Korea to South Korea every year. Most defectors came via China, and it is rare for a North Korean to cross the heavily mined demilitarized zone. The last such crossing was in 2012. With that, let's change tracks and get you some sporting action in Sports Beat. Australia's Steve Smith became the #1 ranked Test batsman in the latest ICC rankings. Smith, who hit 199 runs and an unbeaten 54 runs in the second and final Test against West Indies, has 913 rating points now. Sri Lanka's Kumar Sangakkara is second on the list, followed by A.B. de Villiers of South Africa. Hashim Amla and Angelo Matthews complete the top 5. Australia humbled West Indies today, inflicting a 277-run defeat to win the second Test and claim the Test series 2-0. The Australian bowling attack ripped through West Indies batting, cleaning them up for just 114 runs in under 2 sessions on day 4. Steve Smith was declared player of the match, while Josh Hazlewood was given player of the series. New Zealand defeated England by 3 wickets to take a 2-1 lead in the 5-match ODI series. For now, New Zealand, Kane Williamson scored 118 runs, while Ross Taylor hit 110 and put on a 206-run partnership for the 3rd wicket. Although Ian Morgan and Ben Stokes batted well, but England were bowled out for 302 in 45.2 overs. Douglas Costa's scored an injury-time goal to give Brazil a 2-1 victory over Peru in their opening game of Copa America. Peru took a 3-minute lead through forward Christian Kiva, but Neymar equalized just 2 minutes later with his 44th international goal for Brazil. This was Brazil's 11th successive win after losing to Germany in the World Cup semi-final last year. That's all we have for you on the news at 6, but after a break, the news continues. Stay with us.